One second. All right. Hi, Rachel. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Where are you located?
I'm in Newport Beach, California.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I love California.
Yes,
Yeah.
me too.
I mean, I'm landlocked here in Kansas City, so we have no, mountains or oceans. So it's always nice to get out, on the coast. So, um, but it's great to meet you. And, you have a very interesting collection. I mean, you got lawyer, you got comedian, podcaster, and coach. So
Yeah.
let's find out how we got to the nexus of that very interesting intersection of things. And
Okay.
and to do that, I want to begin with COVID. The last 3 years, how did you survive it, and how did it change the way that you do things now?
I survived it well. I think the only way it impacted me was that my ex-husband moved in and lived with me and our two boys in a very small for California, or maybe not small for California, but small home together for I think like 10 months.
Yeah.
And that actually provided a lot of healing for us. Um, and so I guess I hate to say that COVID impacted me positively, but as a coach, as no longer an attorney and kind of in that realm, I do try to frame things in the positive. So, I mean, I would say it impact my business was has always been, since I left the law, work from home, so that didn't impact me. My business actually grew during that time, and I was able to help people go through it. And I had just concluded a big group program, and I felt like we had done everything to prepare them mentally for what was coming. And so yeah, I caught it early. My mom used to say, although I try to get her not to say, like, no good deed goes unpunished. And I got it from my ex-husband, who had moved in and was like staying on the couch. So um yeah, I think it was interesting to see people's responses and reactions. I definitely learned a lot about human nature and how, because we got it early, how people kind of reacted. Um, so yeah, I would say I learned a lot about life
Yeah.
and humans from it.
Yeah, and I think there's a level of buyer's remorse that goes into this. A lot of people do say there were silver linings, and it's like, well, I feel bad about it, or I don't want to take away from what's going on. And I think we're at a point now, we've been in this post-pandemic era long enough. I think it's safe to do that. But I understand. I mean, there was so much woe that went into it, but I mean, it had a monopoly on us. You had a choice to make. You could either sink or swim. I mean, that's really kind of the choice.
Yeah. And I don't really go into this very often, but as a attorney, kind of as trained in more of like a um, deeper thinking and evidence-based kind of thing. I had a lot of, and I do in every area of my life, I have a lot of hesitation to buy into anything wholeheartedly until I see how things play out. And I know that that was also a very polarizing kind of situation. It's like, well, are you going to be selfish and not, do what everybody else is doing? Or are you going to follow some of the breadcrumbs that seem like maybe maybe we don't, maybe someone that's not showing signs isn't as scary as we think, and it's still up for debate. So I feel like I learned a lot about myself and how I got a lot of trust in myself too through this process as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I do know how very serious it was and how many people did not have that there's no part of me that thinks that there wasn't a lot of misery and awful things that some could have been avoided, and some were part of the virus. So
Yeah,
yeah,
for
definitely a
sure.
complicated
It
issue.
was. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders, career
Okay.
day. Okay.
Okay.
One of the kids looks up and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
It's funny because I feel like that dating right now, I am in front of a bunch of third graders trying to explain what I'm doing. And I'm one of those third graders because
Right.
it was very easy for me to say, I'm a lawyer. In
Right.
fact, the ego part of me was like, any chance I got, it would be like, I'm a lawyer.
Yeah.
And then I transitioned out of that into coaching kind of accidentally and sort of through necessity. And so then there was actually some, I don't know that shame's the right word, but like I was a little timid to say I'm a life coach,
Yeah.
it felt until I started getting amazing results for my clients, it was hard to really like own that. And then once I started doing stand-up comedy more as like a hobby, again, until I had the success, it was kind of like, yeah, I do that sometimes. And now, I've won a competition and I've been in a sitcom pilot and I've had success in that area. I
Yeah.
get paid to do my comedy. And I have great feedback. So, I feel again able to say that I do comedy. So if I'm in front of, so the last part is, as I've transitioned lately into podcasting as kind of my main career choice, when I go on a date or when I'm on a dating app and someone says like, well, what do you do for a living? I kind of fumble around a little bit with trying to explain because I'm a little bit in the transition of I'm part writer. My podcast is a story. And so I
Yeah.
write everything out and
Sure.
then I record it. And so basically, and I wouldn't say this to a third grader, but I've created my own, in my mind, kind of genre of comedy, which is inspirational comedy. I know there's transformational comedy. My goal is to take comedy and personal development and put it into a story form that
Yeah.
I tell through podcasting about dating, and impact people and hopefully get them to go outside their comfort zone and, go live this epic life that we
Yeah.
have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's always difficult, because there's when you have a day job, and I'm in that boat, but I do the podcasting, and there's other things that go into all of that. And it's like you just can't hammer it down to one thing. Um, of all of these things that you do, what do you think is the hardest? Being a lawyer, being a comedian, being a writer, or being a podcaster?
Um, Definitely being a writer.
Yeah.
The discipline that's required. Lately, I've reread the book The Artist's Way, and she talks about waking up and doing morning pages every day. And so I've been waking up at 5:30 so that I can do it before. If I have the boys or don't have the boys, I wake up, I write three pages of freehand. That's been, a challenge for me, this kind of discipline. But the hardest part is the critic that in me. I know I'm good at lawyering. I know I'm good at comedy. It took a while, but I got there to the point where I built my confidence. I know I'm good at podcasting. I've been told these things, but writing it's just me, and I sit there and I go, well, this is crap. Like, this is terrible. Like, who wants to hear this? And that's why I write like 10 drafts of something.
Yeah.
And so this whole letting myself be a beginner, which is really where I am in this kind of writer process, is the hardest for me for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. So, when you were in the third grade, what did you want to be when you grew up?
A lawyer.
Okay, so you lived the dream.
Yeah.
So, let's go back to your childhood. You're obviously highly motivated. You've picked some very difficult things that are probably noteworthy of the most fearful professions and or things to do next to jumping out of an airplane. So, tell me where you were born and raised and how these seeds got into you. How did these notions become who you are today?
It's so funny because I don't think of myself as a brave person at all. People will say to me, like, you're so bold. I have jumped out of an airplane too.
Oh, there you go. See?
But it's kind of like I'm very growth oriented. And I don't know where that came from. Actually, I think it came from not feeling like I was good enough in my childhood, like really being very self-conscious of my looks, my body, my upbringing. We were one of the like 3 Jewish families in Newport Beach. So I just always felt less than, and I felt um, like I should be different than I was. And so the path to that was always to choose the harder choice, I guess. I mean, the lawyer thing, my dad was a lawyer. We watched Matlock together. I was like, this set looks fun, which it was not. Like, spoiler alert, it was
Yeah.
not.
Right.
Don't do that. So that didn't seem hard to me, especially because like my dad did it and I loved him. And he was, it was just kind of like, I could do that. The comedy thing, I was voted best sense of humor in high school, and I was really shocked. I was so shy. I was kind of like, wow, how do people know me and they know that I'm funny? So that gave me a little boost of confidence. And then coaching is kind of an offshoot of being a counselor and being a lawyer. And I used to say that my love language was unsolicited advice. I was like constantly just wanted better for other people. I could see their potential and I believed in them and I just wanted them to have the same thing. So it made sense to kind of do that as a living. I started as a health coach and talking about like kale and legumes and all that kind of stuff is fine. It's it's an interest of mine. But when people were leaving jobs that they hated and changing their life, that's when I got really excited. So it kind of came naturally as a desire to help people. And the podcast, I had a previous podcast all about personal development. I never intended to share about dating. In the past, before the podcast, I'm a very private person. I don't share a lot of details. But in the podcast, I do. For some reason, I really feel like the universe, God, source, like put this on my plate for some reason. And so, how do you say no to that?
Yeah. Well, and that would garner a huge audience. I remember there was an alternative magazine here in Kansas City called The Pitch, and they used to always have this advice love line, or there would be these things where people just randomly would see people in the grocery store out and about and would put personals in. And that's what fueled it. Those are the sections of the magazine. So yeah, at the end of the day, as hard as it is to personalize that, it probably garners a huge amount of traffic.
Yeah. Yeah. We're top 1.5% of podcasts
Oh,
globally.
wow. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. So who's been a hero for you in your life?
Well, besides my dad, he's been a huge hero for me. My grandparents, definitely, on all four of them actually, and three of them survived genocide attempts. So I feel like the kind of keep going perseverance gene is built in. Again, I never really saw it for myself. I always looked up, especially to my grandma, who was in the Holocaust. Her whole family was killed, and she ended up being, because she had blonde hair and blue eyes, someone that saved a lot of people. They went through the sewer system to escape, and she wasn't afraid, or she probably was afraid. I mean, I'm sure we do it in spite of the fear, not without the fear. So rumor has it she may have saved my grandpa. They met in the forest, actually, where they were like hiding for a year. So I feel like my family has served as a really, I didn't again realize it at the time, but looking back, I just feel like they've been a big source of inspiration for me.
So, you're talking about having a podcast about dating and all these things, and we all get these notions early on in our lives, whether they're crushes or people that are ideal, whether it's in Hollywood or otherwise. What was that person for you growing up that you looked at not only from like a look standpoint, but from a personality standpoint and thought, man, I would love to be with that person?
Huey Lewis.
Really?
I had a poster of him and Madonna on my wall, and
Okay.
It's Huey Lewis.
Yeah. I mean, my best friend growing up, his name was Bill. I remember he had that poster, the big one where they were playing pool in the hall.
Oh yeah.
What was the name of that album?
Um,
Seemed like it was the News or something. It was,
yeah.
I mean, they were the News, but it seemed like that was it. Anyway, that's interesting. So let's take that just a bit further. If you can meet anybody alive on the planet right now and have them on your podcast or talk to them or be around them for a little bit, who would it be?
Well, at first I was gonna say Tony Robbins, because I feel like, he's very inspirational, but I do have like a dream manifesting bucket list podcast. And it's actually Michael Singer who wrote The Untethered Soul and The Surrender Experiment. And I think I actually will, I'm just going to manifest it happening and having
Do
them
it.
come, because I talk about those concepts so much, this kind of spirituality principle that kind of snuck up on me. Being an attorney, I was very like skeptical, always looked at like the worst possible pessimistic opportunity that could happen to plan. And slowly I became an optimist. And then layering on the spirituality piece has been so huge for me, just trusting that the universe has my back and that
Yeah.
everything's working out how it's supposed to. And so I feel like being around him in his like anchored belief in all that, the surrender experiment was huge for me. I'd listen to it on my walks and I would cry. Every time the universe would show up, I'm just like, God, this is so magical, this could happen. So, and I've been teaching, my boys the same principles. My son, they're 14 and 7, and they get some of the principles. And my 14-year-old has a little, obviously, more resistance to it. And
Yeah.
he's like me, he's a cynic. But it's fun. I just feel like I want to plant some of these things in them and myself even more,
Yeah.
early. So
So the cornerstone of being a coach is optimism and motivating. And you've obviously been doing a lot of those things in your life. But what is the ultimate motivator? What gets you out of bed every day? What gets you to accomplish what you want to get done?
this is something I struggle with. I actually go through a lot, and I talked about this on my podcast in one of the episodes. Like, I have seasons of like depression and anxiety where like I don't want to do anything. And so I have to kind of honor those and like go through those. And then like today I'm in like a, oh my God, this is the most amazing day kind of mood. And so I've really learned to honor my cycles and like show up for myself when my energy is there. So like today, what got me out of bed was I was like, okay, I have this podcast interview. There's 2 concerts that I want to go to. They're both going on sale at 10 a.m. I am going to get tickets to both of them. I don't care what happens. And I did. And it's kind of this like epic life, right?
Yeah.
Like these life is meant to be lived. I mean, that's one of the things that really kind of came out of COVID. Say yes to opportunities.
Yeah.
So traveling, spending time with my girlfriends, with my boys, my family, making sure that my life is filled with these epic moments um, is what really gets me out of bed. And then all these things are kind of a vehicle towards that.
So what's been one of the best client success stories you've been involved with, whether it involves being an attorney, whether it involves your podcast or coaching? What's one of those stories that always puts a smile on your face?
Um, oh, there's a lot, but I
That's good.
think I'm trying to decide between 2 of my coaching clients. Um I think the one that I like the most is I have a client who uh we worked together for a long time. We were friends as well. And I could tell that she wasn't really motivated in what she was doing. And she came to me and scheduled a session because of that. And I was like, you got to get back to like why you're doing it, kind of like you were talking about, like what's the motivation behind it? And she was talking about, and actually, the other client that I was thinking of, it was the same exact scenario. Both of them had a 2-year plan. And I was like, we're not waiting 2 years. Let's do it now. Like, let's just do it now. Let's collapse 2 years into 2 weeks. Like, let's just do it now. And again, one client quit her job and it changed her life. And then this client was looking at property. She said she always wanted to buy property in like wine country up, by us. And so I was like, I want you to do it now, And so within a couple weeks, she was in escrow on a property up there, which they totally transformed, increased in value like crazy. Right now, she rents it out and makes so much money. It's a form of income for her now instead of
Yeah.
what it was. She hosts retreats there. Doing that had opened up so many doors for her and in her mind what she was capable of. I think that's the thing I love so much. When we do something scary, like do stand-up comedy, buy a ranch, whatever it opens up doors in your mind that you can do hard things, and
Yeah.
it gets you to do other bigger hard things. So, her whole life transformed. And I love watching that because it inspires me back. I like working with people that inspire me back.
Yeah, it's symbiotic for sure. So of all the things that you've overcome, done, accomplished in your life, what are you the proudest of?
Um, I think turning my life around after my divorce, definitely. And doing it for not only me, but my boys. We are I'm happier than I've ever like been in my whole life. I'm probably besides maybe my 20s, like fitter than I've ever been in my whole life. I care so much less about what people think. Yesterday, I bought this hat from this comedian. It says I'm single. And yesterday I just wore it out, like just for fun. It was kind of like, I don't care,
Yeah.
which is so freeing. So the whole transformation of being very self-conscious and very low in self-esteem to just being like, this is me, take
Yeah.
it or leave it. Doesn't matter, if you like it or not. Like you and I'll like me, and we'll be fine,
Yeah, for sure. So speaking of your 20s, if you have a dream tonight, you run into that version of you, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on the wisdom you've gained in your life up to this point, what would you tell that young version of you?
Well, I always love, and this is what I teach my boys, the affirmation, everything is always working out for me. Everything is always working out for me. When you come up to something, you don't get that job you want, that relationship, whatever it is for your best good. One of the things that I fear the most is feeling disappointed. It's such a weird thing, but I just like hate the feeling of disappointment. And so when I put that everything's always working out for me kind of blanket over things, there's a trust factor. There's an ease, there's so much peace that comes in. I mean, obviously I would tell myself, you're better than you think you are, like nobody's thinking about you as much as you are, so you don't need to worry. I, definitely would also stress not to worry so much what other people think. But the kind of hack, the shorthand that is always my, party favor is everything's always working out for me.
So who's your favorite comedian?
I would say Bill Burr.
Yeah, me too. Bill's the king. Um,
Yeah.
what's your favorite piece of writing that you've ever penned?
I wrote a one woman show, which has never been. I think I sent it to one guy that I went on a date with, and so I think besides him, it's only me and him have read it. But it's basically the myth of this and how many of us seek to be special, but in doing that, we're really giving our power away, because special is special to who? It's always somebody outside of ourselves. And so it's this one woman show with 5 scenes, and it's basically putting specialness on trial. So there's like a judge, there's a prosecutor, all played, by one character. And writing that really eliminated the need to feel special for me. So it was very like healing kind of thing.
Yeah. So everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, all these different incarnations, podcast hosts, when you were an attorney, comedian, but ultimately you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
It's interesting because I've been getting a lot of messages from friends lately that listened to my episode where I talked about depression, and they're like, God, you always seem like you have everything all figured out and so together. And that is not my perception of me at all. I'm like, me? No, I do not have it figured out. I feel very kind of like a young, in the sense of immature almost a little bit in some of how I look at life, naive maybe. Yes, I have, the lawyer part, and I have these other things, but like my soul wants to believe in like the good and romantic comedies, and that, everybody has something good, that kind of optimist. So that's my soul. And then there's like the layered on it skeptic to kind of
Mhm.
protect her.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't have it all going on, because they are polar opposites and they're constantly telling me how the world works, and it's confusing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my perception of myself.
So just to give you a quick story about talking about meeting that ultimate person that you want to meet. I'm 50, well, I'll be 51, but when I was in high school, my favorite hero of all was the pitcher Dwight Gooden. And I always wondered how I could get in touch with them. And there's certain people that you just can't touch. They just don't have agents. They don't have a website. So they had in Kansas City, we have the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, and they, since the pandemic, they used to have this thing called the Hall of Game, which was kind of their Hall of Fame. Well, he was here, and I got press passes, and I went, and I actually met him and got to interview him for a minute, and I'm still blown away. Like and my son was there, and I told him, because I was kind of in this euphoria, I said, whatever you do while I'm doing this, you just snap as many photos and videos as you can.
Yeah.
So he only did like one of each, but it
Yeah.
was really, really cool. So it's funny how in life, I just never thought that I would get to that point, and how those things can kind of just, life has its way of just kind of leading up to you,
Yeah.
so it can totally happen, it's plausible.
I love
Um,
that.
so if anyone out there wants to see your comedy, listen to your podcast, get involved with anything pertaining to your world, where can they go?
So my podcast is everywhere that you
Yeah.
listen to podcasts, wherever they're listening to your podcast, even YouTube. It's called Love Before 100. It has an Instagram page, and then my personal one is the Rachel Burch, and I always respond to messages if people message me if they want to see anything. I haven't put out my latest comedy yet. I'm trying to decide what to actually do with it. My old comedy's up, and I plan to do more of it. So yeah.
Cool. Rachel, this has been great. Thank you for your story. Such an interesting, lineage leading up to today. So best of luck with everything. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Have a great day.
You too.